Hey everybody, welcome back to No More Silos. My name is Erika Santiago and this is my podcast on cultural Christianity. Welcome back and thank you so much for your continued support of this podcast and what we're doing here and on Patreon. So last time we were together, which was about a week ago, I was talking about what we believe and what we want in a church so that we can find a new church in a new city. And we talked about what do you believe? Because, what's your filter? What are you filtering your beliefs through? From an academic standpoint, we might use the word hermeneutic. What is your hermeneutic? I'm a huge advocate, of course, as a Christian, of having a Jesus-centered hermeneutic. Not just what did Jesus say or do, but what did he command for us to do? And that, I think, is ultimately important. Like, what do you believe and why do you believe it? And having that foundation so that you can answer some basic questions about what you're looking for in a church. And I really don't think we think about this enough. And that's how this ended up being a part two, because as I started talking, I realized, hey, there's more to it than just dropping in and feeling a connection. And there's only 4 weeks, maybe 5 in a month. And so if we take time to think through some details, we will save ourselves time and energy and stress when it comes to finding a new church. I don't know about you, but every time I've had to go and look for a new church as an adult Christian, it has been challenging. Why? Because I'm sitting there going, I don't know what I want to do. I grew up Baptist, but do I want to go to a Baptist church? Non-denominational is so fuzzy sometimes. You don't really know what you're getting into. And then now I live in the Bible Belt, and so there's churches on every corner. And yes, right now, even now, as Dr. King said 50, maybe 60 years ago, Sunday morning is still the most segregated time of worship, still the most segregated time of day, the most segregated day of the week, because our churches, even in all of our efforts to be diverse and multicultural, there's a sliding scale on exactly what that means to everybody. And I'll tell you, it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. And then there's also the folks that don't do their homework before they stand up to speak. And what I mean by that is like, I was on Instagram a little while ago, and a friend of mine was doing a video, one of those like commentary videos, because he came across, probably someone sent this to him, a pastor who gave a sermon on the demonic healing of people with autism. Like, and the guy, and he knew what he said was controversial. I listened to it. The guy's, but at the same time, he believed what he believed. And you know what? Besides the fact that it's kind of wrong and offensive, but if you were new or you just showed up in that church that Sunday, if you don't already know what you believe, if you don't already have your own Jesus-centered interpretation of what's in God's word, if you don't understand your own theological perspective, you may walk into a church or look at their website and not realize that you've walked into something that is potentially going to be wonky. And so I can just imagine. It was just crazy. Anyway, what do you want in a church? What do you believe? What's your filter? That's what we talked about last time. And we started talking about theology and doctrine and denominations. And then I looked up and I was like, whoa, this is going to take me a little bit more time. And so today we're going to finish that conversation so that you can identify options for a new church and tell if what they believe is aligned to your beliefs. And it's okay if you want to grow in an area, but you don't want to set yourself up for being annoyed with the pastor on a regular basis, right? So, and then we'll also kind of finalize this or pull it all together with a few steps and ideas about how to find a new church in a new city. Because, and as I mentioned this, I think last time, my oldest daughter just went away to college. And, as a homeschooler, it just didn't occur to me when I had her working a year ahead. So she's only actually 17 and a freshman. Didn't occur to me that she'd want to go to school out of state. So now she is out of state, away from us, and trying to find a new church. And even though my pastor / husband made a list for her, she's still been church hopping with some of her new college friends, which really made me think about my experience and what that was like when I first moved to Atlanta and was looking for a church. I went to with friends to their churches. I had a friend who was so kind to take me around to different churches that they thought I would like, or was in line with my beliefs, although I'm not entirely certain I was very clear on what I believed at the time. But there was that. But then also my experience when I was married and had kids and was looking for a church with my husband, what all of that entailed. All of those memories have been kind of bouncing around in my head the last couple of weeks as I have these conversations with my daughter about her experiences on Sundays. So let's jump right into this, shall we? We left off with denominations, theology, and doctrine. Something else to think about is worship style. Most of us take for granted that your church, the church you grew up in, maybe that's the right way or the only way to have church. And then there's those of us who have no idea what to expect with church because you didn't grow up in church, so you're not really sure. Whatever you're most comfortable with. There are some churches where people sit and watch. Some people it's very participatory. The music could be loud. It could be soft. It could be mostly hymns. It could be a big worship band. It could be an orchestra. It runs the gamut. What do you like? What would you like to be around? And what helps you feel more connected and closer to God? Remember last time we talked about how you feel also matters in this equation, how you feel when you walk in. So if you enjoy an energetic and participatory worship and modern music that you would hear on the radio, you may prioritize finding a church with contemporary worship style and a praise band. Now, how do you find that church? Well, you can look on their website. Most churches, though, I'll tell you, do not put on their website all the time what their worship style is. So you may need to go to their YouTube channel and see if they have a whole service or maybe a worship night video that you can watch. A lot of churches now, especially the larger ones, will trim their Sunday service to just the sermon by Tuesday or Wednesday. And so on Sundays, you've got the live stream. You've got a better idea of what their worship style is like. But even though you're watching it online, you still don't know what it's like to be in the building there. Because I tell you, there's some churches, the worship band and the worship singers can be singing their heart out and playing their heart out for God, and the people could be sitting in the audience and literally just looking at them. And if that would bother you, there's really no way to tell that online. So you kind of have to go. But what else is a kind of have to go, but you can preview it on YouTube? Sermon content. What type of sermons resonate with you? Some churches focus on expository preaching, where the sermon is based on a specific Bible passage or a book of the Bible for the whole month. There have been times where my husband has done a sermon series just on the book of Romans, and all the messages come out of Romans. Or there have been churches that I've gone to where the pastor preaches through the Bible in a year, or just the New Testament in a year. And so they kind of crawl through it like a Bible study. And that is expository preaching. Alternatively, you might prefer sermons that relate to everyday life and practical guidance. And so you might seek out a church that offers sermons that are based on topics. And so there's a theme for the month or a theme for a 6-week period of time. And that might be what you like. And when it comes to teaching and preaching, you want to evaluate the quality of the teaching and preaching at the church. How do you do that? Well, the way that I recommend doing this is you should check out the bio of the pastor and church leadership. So go to the website. Who's doing the preaching? Some pastors are really good at speaking cross-generationally. Others, not so much. So, age may not be a factor. But when you read the pastor's bio, oftentimes it'll tell you a little bit about what they're interested in, what they're focused on, a little bit about them. Where they're from maybe might be included. Where they went to school might be included. And those are things that might clue you into what to expect. But of course, you can always listen to a message on YouTube. When the videographer cuts to the audience on YouTube, who do you see? What are they doing? How are they dressed? Same for photos on the website. Do you see yourself there? So when you're thinking about sermon content, thinking about teaching and teaching style, is the preacher someone that speaks to the audience in a calm, collected voice, or is it someone that is running around on stage or easily excited? Like, what is it that you enjoy hearing? Some people have an aversion to preachers yelling at them. I'm one of those people. I don't do the yelling thing, but I get when someone, especially if I'm in person, because now I can't control the volume. If I'm watching it on TV or YouTube, I can always turn the volume down, or just watch it with closed captions. But if you're in person, how, what that experience is going to be like, that may matter more than the content itself, how they're communicating. Now, something else that you can also gauge on the church website is community and fellowship. And you can gauge this when you physically visit. Again, how do you feel when you show up? How did the people make you feel from the parking lot to the time you sat down to the time you left? Now, I will tell you, sometimes people leave rather quickly, like we'll give the benediction and then they bolt for the door. It's like, I don't want to talk to anybody. Let me just get out of here. And I guess that's okay. I understand. I'm an introvert. So if I were new, I probably wouldn't want to talk to anybody either. But I do kind of judge when I go to other churches on whether or not someone made an attempt to talk to me. There's a big difference between an usher or greeter attempting to talk to you and making you feel welcome versus being an introvert and just kind of brushing them off and going, don't want to talk to people. So there's a difference. So think about the importance of community and fellowship in your church experience. Some churches have small groups or ministries that provide opportunities for deeper connection and support. And these are things that you can identify usually on the website. Also, again, on Sunday mornings, because a lot of churches don't put all of their events and activities on their website just because it could be too many, or it may not be relevant, or maybe they just don't have a volunteer available to keep the website quite that updated. And that could be a thing too. So if you're looking for a sense of community and fellowship within a church, you really want to go on a Sunday and listen to the announcements and what they're talking about, they're doing, or what's coming up, because you're looking for opportunities then socially and maybe a Bible study to connect and build relationships. Why? Because as I've said before, salvation is a community creating event. And so community and fellowship are super, super important. You know what else is important? Location and accessibility. You want to consider the location and accessibility of the church. Atlanta is... you need a car in Atlanta. And even if you live in downtown Atlanta, there's no guarantee that the church that's down the street from you in Midtown or Buckhead or downtown Atlanta is the church for you. So how are you going to get to the church that you're looking for? If you prefer attending a church near your home, you might want to look for a church within a certain range. I'm one of those people that I prefer to not have more than a 15-minute drive. I don't know. It's just me. But we have people in our church who show up who live an hour away, and they're very consistent. So it's up to you. Most of us in Atlanta, in Metro Atlanta, we live near our jobs and the schools we want our kids to go to. So most of us do not consider living near our church. But I'll tell you, when you do live near your church, it allows you to engage and participate more in the activities the church has going on and really build those connections and relationships with people in a way that doesn't limit you from being able to participate because you're dreading the drive home, or you're dreading getting out your house and actually going and participating. And then, of course, once you get there, you're having a great time. So think about those kinds of things. Also think about accessibility if you, from the standpoint of if you need assistance getting into the church and out of the church and how they have that set up. Most churches are ADA compliant, and they make accommodations for that. But maybe if there's some other accommodation you need, that might be something you want to check out and maybe call the church or send an email to find out more to get those details that you need. Now, another thing that I'm thinking about when I think of finding a new church, and when I visit churches, even when I visit churches for conferences, I'm always looking at their brochures. And, that's one of the ways I get ideas for our church. But looking at brochures and stuff, you get an idea for what's their vibe when it comes to missions and outreach. When I teach lessons about cults and churches with cultic tendencies, we discuss how they treat outsiders. As a person of color, I look for what they do for missions. Like, are all the mission efforts for people of color in other parts of the world? Do they serve the local community or the nearby inner city? What do they do? Are they partnering with local ministries to assist in a culturally appropriate way? Or are they coming in like superheroes to take over and take pictures with cute, starving, and sick kids? How do they talk about the people they're serving? Do they other them? The doctrine of discovery in 1492 is a statement by the Roman Catholic Church that literally gave permission to bring Christianity to the quote-unquote heathens of the quote-unquote uncivilized world. Is the doctrine of discovery the filter through which they speak at this church that you're checking out? Or are they championing efforts to have the scriptures translated into the local language and training ministers locally, providing educational resources as well as economic resources? It's important to kind of look at how they're filtering their idea to go and make disciples of all the world. There are entire denominations that are built around their missionary activity, and they see their missionary activity, it's their hermeneutic, through a filter of we have to go somewhere and go help these people who need us. And there's, on the surface, really nothing wrong with that, except if they're ignoring the people who are right there in close proximity. And that to me is a huge turnoff if I'm looking at a church. I'm interested in knowing that they're not just helping people around the world in a productive way, but they are also helping people in their immediate community. Now, the early church, the way they did outreach was very much an all for one for all. We're all in this together. And the way they would do that is they'd go outside the city gates and walls and look for abandoned babies and children. They'd take care of the orphans and widows that were in their community, and they pooled their resources together. And we see this in the book of Acts. They pulled their resources together so that no one was without need. But if you're in a church community where there aren't any needs in your immediate membership, then now we're looking at, we toss our ring out into the community. We toss our net out into the community and see, well, what's immediately needed in our community. And if we have to move beyond that, then we do that. But some churches take their lead from, I'm going to go halfway around the world and go help those people, and I'm going to ignore the people who are in close proximity. And that's something that, you have to look at and decide, is that something that I want to be a part of? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Now, another thing that's important is inclusivity and diversity. Now, many of you who listen to this podcast, you might be a person of color living anywhere in the world, or you might be a person of European descent living anywhere in the world. And you might sit there and go, okay, I have a completely different perspective than someone of European descent, than someone of color when it comes to inclusivity and diversity. There's a couple of different ways you could look at this, but let me just say this. Consider the church's stance on inclusivity and diversity, looking for a church that welcomes and values individuals from different backgrounds, races, cultures, socioeconomic status. All of that matters because Galatians 3:28, neither slave nor free, Jew nor Greek, male nor female, like the idea is we're all in this together and we're all on a level playing field. So whether you have money or don't, that's one of the reasons our church is come as you are, and why I don't make a huge effort to get all dressed up on Sundays. One, I think it's like trauma from my childhood of having to dress up and wear dresses. So there's that. I just don't like to. But there's also, and I've had to explain this several times over the years to people, if you're new in our church, I don't want you to feel like you're out of place because you're underdressed. And if you have been there for a while, some of the people in our church love to dress up, my husband being one of them. Knock yourself out. So it's, wear what makes you comfortable so that what you have to wear on Sunday is not a barrier, or what you feel like you don't have to wear on a Sunday is a barrier to you coming to church. So that is something that, you want to keep in mind. Also, not just that. And then there's also the fact that the verses that talk about what people wear in the New Testament are actually talking about the socioeconomic differences. Not that women should have their heads covered or have dresses down to their ankles. Paul was actually talking about, in Timothy, about women being overly ornate and showing off and flaunting their wealth at church. That's what those verses were really about in context. It's not that that you can't wear a short skirt or a sleeveless top to church. It's don't flaunt your wealth to the point where the people who are unwealthy feel like they don't belong. You know, you can't hold up a sign in a parking lot that says you belong here and then contradict that with your actions once the person gets inside. But then the other thing, too, is just embracing diversity and inclusivity, making your church a safe place for people of all different identities and helping them work towards a Jesus-centered hermeneutic around their identity. It was really popular about 10, 15 years ago to really push for diversity, and I think it still is. But one of the things that we notice is that a lot of times diversity is filtered through what the church leadership deems as the dominant culture that everyone must assimilate to. And that's not truly diversity. Sameness is not unity. Unity does not mean that we're all the same. Unity means we're diverse, that we can walk in our differences because that's how God created us. And the newer thing, too, is to create safe spaces. In fact, you can get a badge on your website letting people know that LGBTQ plus community is welcome to worship in your church. Unfortunately, a lot of churches are having difficulty having honest theological conversations, exegetical conversations around this topic. And so they're all over the spectrum right now with this. So this is something that maybe if the church has a blog or you can watch a few sermons, you can figure out if this is a safe place for you to come and to grow and to worship as a follower of Jesus. One more thing about location is schedule. If you are, and I forgot to mention this a few minutes ago, if you are 30 minutes to an hour away from your church, you probably do want to consider what the schedule is. You want to take into account the convenience of actually attending services. You'd be surprised how many people show up habitually late to church service, like to the point where they miss worship every time, or they get there 30 minutes late. And our church, our service is so short sometimes. It might be anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. Just depends on what we're doing that day. And we don't follow a prescribed liturgy because we're non-denominational. And so we don't always do things in the same order. And so there's that. And I can't tell you how many times we've had people who are guests of members show up 30, 40 minutes late and be like, oh my God, I walked in on the middle of the sermon. But I thought, and it's like, well, what time did you think church started? They're like, well, my friend told me it started at 10. I'm like, dude, it's 10:45. Well, yeah, but I figured, there's like fluff in the middle. It's like, oh yeah, we're not that kind of church. So, we're no fluff. So your proximity and accessibility to the church are going to be important, but you also want to make sure that if you have a busy schedule, you want to look for a church that has maybe multiple services so that you have some flexibility in, hey, it doesn't look like I'm going to make it to the 10 o'clock service. Let me go to the next service. Does that make sense? I hope so. Not saying I don't want everybody to come to our church, but I also realize that it is super awkward when people show up like really, really late. So it's, we don't want to, if this is your church and you're trying to be part of this community, you want to also be committed to showing up on time. And the last thing I want to mention is children and youth programs. One, because I'm a parent, but also because I notice some churches do different things when it comes to children and youth. If you have kids, you want to consider the availability and the quality of the children and youth programs. Old school, there's Sunday school, but that's usually before service. Again, if we've got folks that are showing up 30 minutes late for church, that's probably not going to work. But here's the other reason to come on time. If you've got kids, you really don't want them to miss the fun parts of the kids worship, because the kids, they jump up and down and they scream and they yell and they have a great worship experience, and then they get into their small groups and they do their lesson activities and all of that together. And if you show up 30 minutes late, well, then your kid just missed, the chance to really connect with the other kids in the ministry. So you don't want to hold them back from doing that. So the thing is, most churches that have kids or teen programs are challenged with being entertaining enough that the kids want to come back and relevant enough that the teens want to come and participate. And all of it to be truly equipping our younger saints with the theology, scripture, doctrine, apologetics, emotional intelligence, and life skills that they need to advance the kingdom of God. And so shout out to our kids and teens ministry for doing this well in our church. But it is something, if that's important to you, make sure that you check that out on the website to see what they've got going on. Also, before you come, and let me let you guys in on a little secret. A lot of churches scale back in the summertime. I know it sounds backwards, but a lot of churches scale back services. They scale back kids ministry in the summertime and put in place maybe events where kids can connect and families can connect outside of the regular Sunday service. So keep that in mind when you are checking out or planning to attend a church in the summertime. Make sure they're actually having kids ministry as usual. It's probably not the best time to kick the tires of a church, at least here in the South. I don't know, maybe it's different up north, but yeah, so that's something that's important. If kids ministry is important to you, definitely consider coming after the school year starts and everybody gets ramped back up. Why is this? Because a lot of the volunteers also go on vacation in the summer. And so it's harder for churches, especially small to mid-sized churches, to maintain a full staff during the summertime of volunteers. I'm going to use that word again, volunteers, people volunteering their time as part of the community, unpaid babysitters and teachers who are engaging with our kids on days, and they do it because it matters to God. Jesus said, let the little children come to me. That really matters. Training the children up, that really matters. But guess what? The reality is, in the summertime, people go on vacation. So if you're looking for a new church, cut them some slack on what's going on with kids ministry in the summertime. So here, just to wrap up and summarize some of the things that we've been talking about today when it comes to finding a new church after moving to a new city, do it with a sense of adventure, a sense of new beginnings. You know that settling into a new community and finding a church is going to be really important to your overall well-being in this new community, becoming rooted in your new community. And so you want to find a church that aligns with your beliefs and your values. Be very intentional about your search by setting your search criteria. Explore the different worship styles and see which one resonates with you if it's something you've never really thought about before. Attend a few worship services, both online and in person, to really get the complete experience of what it's like going to that church. And then connect with the community. Look for opportunities to feel connected, to engage with the church community beyond Sunday worship. Consider joining a small group. Most churches will let you join a small group and you don't have to be a member. Most churches will let you volunteer for some activities, especially outreach, without being a member. So attend a social event and evaluate the church's commitment to fostering strong relationships and authentic connections among its members. Because remember, salvation is a community creating event. And so you want to make sure that your experience is one that builds community, because that matters. That's the model we see in the New Testament. Now, here's the other thing that you got to think about. While you're on your search, it's important to be aware of potential red flags that may indicate that the church is not the right fit for you. And these red flags can include a lack of transparency, toxic leadership dynamics, or a focus on materialistic pursuits rather than spirituality. So trust your instincts and pay attention to any discomfort or uneasiness you may feel during your interactions with the church and its members. But really, pay attention. That's the Holy Spirit speaking to you, the Holy Spirit indwelling in you, letting you know something isn't quite right here. Listen to that. walk, run away if you have to. And here's the thing. Sometimes the thing that a lot of the cults or folks that have a heterodox belief, in other words, they don't believe in the Nicene Creed, for example, which 95% of most Christian churches and sects do. If they have some kind of alternative theology that's a false teaching, it's not in line with the New Testament, they will go overboard on the relationship aspect of things. They will usually really, really target that need for connection and community with you, so they can pull you in to their wackiness without hopefully setting off any red flags, or you're already committed to the community before you check it, before you realize there's some red flags here that you should have paid attention to. Which is why I'm telling you, make sure you know your theology and your doctrine preferences before you embark on that church. A couple of examples recently from my daughter's experience. I won't tell you the names of the churches, but one church on their website, they actually have what they believe. And so when you're looking at churches on their website, you can check out the pastor bio, the leadership, what their titles are. It tells you kind of what everybody's doing. You can look at the statement of faith, or what we believe statement, or they might have a page that says what to expect when you get here. And most of the time, they'll actually answer most of your questions on those 2 pages, and then you can keep it moving. It's the beliefs sometimes, though, that really will hone in on some churches, and that will raise the red flag, the biggest red flags. So one church, they literally had a belief about the government, the government's role, and they had some other interesting beliefs that I was sitting there going, oh my gosh, they actually put this in black and white on their website. But thank God they did, because then it's like, oh, we won't be going there. And then the other one, in their beliefs, they specifically talked about women pastors and said that that's, not part of their beliefs. And that's fine. I love the way Cynthia Westfall puts it, though, in her book, Paul and Gender. She says, role distinctions are a euphemism for role restrictions of the disadvantaged party. I'll say that one more time. Role distinctions are a euphemism for role restrictions of the disadvantaged party. So if you see something like that on a church website, if they pinpoint that, it's probably not for you. If you're someone that listens to No More Silos and you go along with or agree with me, you probably would not want to go to that church if there's something along those lines. I like the way she puts it more compactly, talking about the interpretation of Paul's letters. She says, Paul places the responsibility and obligation for sociological transformation in the Christian community upon those who have power, while he reverses the culture's negative evaluation of those without power, which is consistent with Jesus' teaching. So, putting that into perspective, if you come across a church website and in their statement of beliefs, they have things that do not statements that indicate that they are not on board with the upside down kingdom of Jesus, where Jesus came to serve and not be served, that they are very, everyone's got a gender specific role, that's probably a red flag for you to be aware of. Or if they are putting their faith in the government in an unhealthy way. I'll put in your show notes a great video that explains the historical interpretation of Romans chapter 13, which is often cited for obeying the government and misused left, right, and center. So finding a new church after moving to a new city can be both exciting and challenging. But again, at the end of the day, you just got to know what you know. By embarking on this journey with intentionality and discernment and prayer, we can discover a faith community that nourishes our spiritual growth and provides a welcoming home away from home. Remember to trust your instincts and seek God's guidance throughout the process. And my prayer for you is that may your search be fruitful, and that you may find a church where you can thrive, where you can flourish in your faith, where you can grow spiritually. And I hope that this has been helpful. I'm sure I've probably left some things out. So if you have comments, questions, or considerations for this topic, you're always welcome to reach out to me on Instagram at Cultural Christianity, or shoot me an email at podcast@erikasantiago.com. I invite you to check out our Patreon page at No More Silos, where I'll be putting up some resources to help you know and understand what you believe. So that's it for today. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for listening.